Grab your kilts, sharpen your pencils. We're about to embark on a journey through the thoughts of David Hume. This 18th century Scottish philosopher took empiricism to its logical extreme and left rationalists scratching their heads. So don your thinking cap, or perhaps a tam o' shanter, because by the end of this video, you're going to have a clear and concise understanding of one of history's most important philosophers. Born in 1711 in Edinburgh, young David was a bookworm from the start. Legend has it at the age of 12, he was already devouring ancient classics in their original languages, while you and I were playing with Legos. And his family had high hopes that he would become a lawyer, a prestigious, money-making career, but Hume had other ideas. At 18, he had a philosophical epiphany that sent him on his life's path. As he later wrote, there seemed to be, opened up to me, a new scene of thought. So even from a young age, he talked like a philosopher. And he sort of just kind of stumbled into the matrix of philosophy, and when he was given the option, he took the red pill. Now, Hume's early life, it was marked by a ferocious appetite for learning. He attended the University of Edinburgh at the remarkable young age of 10 or 11, the records are unclear. So, I mean, at 10, I was still wondering if there was a monster under my bed.
Look under all the beds.
And so while there, he studied a really broad curriculum. He studied the classics. He studied mathematics, natural philosophy, logic, and metaphysics. And this real diverse education, it's what laid the groundwork for his later philosophical thoughts, they would touch on everything from epistemology to ethics, all the way over to political theory. Despite his brilliance, Hume struggled to find academic employment. The universities of Edinburgh and Glasgow both rejected him, probably due to a suspicion about his religious orthodoxy, or should I say lack thereof. And this rejection was kind of a turning point for Hume, so rather than conform to the religious expectations of the time, he decides to forge his own path as an independent thinker. So he's undeterred by academic rejection, and he decides to be a freelance intellectual, very Socrates of him. So he spent some time in France, where he penned his masterpiece, a Treatise of Human Nature, published that when he was just 28, talk about a quarter-life crisis productivity boost, and his time in France was crucial for his intellectual development. He absorbed French culture, ideas, and the relative freedom from British religious constraints allowed his skeptical tendencies to flourish. So imagine walking into a centuries-old debate about knowledge and declaring, guys, I think we've been doing this all wrong, and that's essentially what Hume does with his treatise. It's like he's saying, hey everyone, let's base our philosophy on human nature and experience, not on abstract reasoning. So some of his key concepts are, first, it is empiricism, but on steroids. This is Hume's philosophical power move. It's the foundation for his entire system. He's saying, listen up. All our ideas come from experience. There's no innate knowledge, no a priori truth. It's all about impressions and ideas. It's like Hume is hosting the ultimate philosophical reality show, and he keeps showing up with the sensations. Now, Hume divides all mental content into two categories. The first is impressions. These are vivid perceptions like sensations, emotions, and passions, and ideas, which are less vivid copies of impressions. And this distinction is crucial for his philosophy, as it forms the basis for his skeptical arguments about causation, the self, and even the existence of God. And then we have the problem of induction. Hume drops the mic with his famous argument that we can't rationally justify our belief in cause and effect. It's like he's saying, just because the sun has risen every day doesn't mean it'll rise tomorrow. Past experience doesn't guarantee future results. It's sort of like the philosophical equivalent of reading the fine print on an investment brochure. Now, this argument, it has far-reaching implications. It challenges the foundations of scientific reasoning, our everyday assumptions about how the world works. Now, Hume's not saying we shouldn't make any inductive inferences, but that we can't justify them through pure reason. Instead, he argues that our tendency to infer cause and from effect is a matter of habit or custom and not logical necessity. The next is the bundle theory of the self. Hume argues that there's no permanent, unchanging self. We are just a bundle of perceptions. It's like he's telling us you're not really a soul, you're just a collection of all these experiences. And this idea challenged the notion of personal identity that had been dominant since Descartes. Hume argues that when we are introspective, we don't find a united self. A unified self, we only find a series of perceptions. And this view has implications for ethics, psychology, and even Buddhist-inspired philosophies of the self. And then we have skepticism and miracles. Hume sets the bar really high here for believing in miracles. He argues that it's always more rational to doubt the miracle than to doubt the laws of nature. And Hume's argument is more nuanced than simple disbelief. He contends that given the unreliability of human testimony and the regularity of natural laws, it's always more reasonable to doubt miraculous claims than to accept them. The fifth idea was the is-ought problem. Hume points out that you can't derive moral conclusions, what ought to be, from purely factual premises, what is. It's like he's telling ethicists you can't get a should from an is no matter how hard you try to squeeze. And this insight is often called Hume's guillotine. It has had profound impact on moral philosophy, and it challenges attempts to ground ethics in purely factual or scientific claims. And it has influenced debates about the relationship between science and morality for a long time. And this work was so groundbreaking, it fell completely flat when it was first published. Hume famously said it fell deadborn from the press. It's like he dropped the hottest mixtape of the 18th century, but no one had an iPod. Now, this initial failure of the treatise was a bit disappointing for Hume, because he had poured years and years of time into this work, and he believed it contained some of his best ideas. However, just like in the past, the setback didn't deter him. Instead, it prompted him to rethink his approach to philosophy and writing, and it eventually led to some successful works. So his next piece was the Enquiry concerning human understanding. So after the treatise flopped, Hume decided, you know what, I'm going to repackage my ideas in a more accessible format. And that's where we have the result of the Enquiry concerning human understanding. And this is sort of like the radio-friendly version of a lot of his earlier philosophical ideas. Some of the key ideas we're going to encounter is first the core principle. Hume argues that all our ideas are just faded copies of our sensory impressions. It's like he's saying your mind is just a Xerox machine for your senses, but the toner's running low. And this principle is Hume's way of grounding all knowledge in experience. He challenges the rationalist claims about innate ideas, and he sets the stage for what is his skeptical arguments. So the first is the relations of ideas versus matter of fact. So Hume distinguishes between analytical truths like math and synthetic truths about the world. It's like he's saying 2 + 2 is 4. That's true by definition, but the sun will rise tomorrow is just a very educated guess. Now, this distinction anticipated Kant's analytical synthetic distinction and has been influential in debates about the nature of mathematical and logical truths. And then next is necessary connections. Hume challenges the idea that we can perceive necessary connections between causes and effects. It's like he's telling scientists you can see the cue ball hit the 8 ball, but you can't see the muss that makes it a move. Now, this argument, it's a more refined version of his critique of induction from the treatise. It suggests that our idea of causation is based on the constant conjunction of events and not on any perceivable necessary connection. The fourth piece is the missing shade of blue. Hume presents a thought experiment about whether we can have an idea without a corresponding impression. It's like he's asking, can you imagine a color you've never seen? And if you can, does that wreck my whole theory? Now, this thought experiment is interesting because it seems to challenge Hume's own empiricist principles. He acknowledges it's a potential counterexample, but dismisses it as too rare to undermine his general theory. Now, this work made Hume and his ideas far more accessible but also influential. The Enquiry was indeed a much greater success than the treatise, both in terms of sale and also in intellectual impact, because it presented Hume's ideas in a clearer, more concise form, making them far more accessible to a wider audience. And this success for him, it vindicated his decision to rework his earlier ideas and helped establish his reputation as a major philosophical figure. Now, Hume saved some of his most controversial ideas for after his death. And he does that in the work of Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. And this is this is published after he dies, and he takes on the arguments for God's existence. It's like he's hosting a debate between a skeptic, a rationalist, and an empiricist. Which reminds me of a joke. A skeptic, a rationalist, and an empiricist walk into a bar. The skeptic says, "I doubt this place exists." The rationalist replies, "Well, logically speaking, if we're here, it must exist." And the empiricist chimes in and says, "Let's order some drinks and test the hypothesis." The bartender overhears and mutters, "Great. Another night of serving invisible drinks to figments of my imagination." So what are the key concepts? Well, first is the design argument. Hume critiques the idea that the apparent design in nature proves God's existence. It's like he's saying, sure, the world looks designed, but have you seen a platypus? Like, who designed those? Now, Hume's critique of the design argument is multifaceted. He questions whether we can infer a designer from apparent design, whether the analogy between human artifacts and the universe is valid, and whether the apparent design in nature actually suggests a perfect designer. Second was the problem of evil. Hume raises the classic question, if God is all-powerful and all-good, why is there evil? It's like he's asking, if God's running the show, why does it sometimes feel like we might be in a horror movie? And then 3 was anthropomorphism. Hume suggests that our idea of God is just an inflated version of human attributes. It's like he's telling theologians your God sounds suspiciously like a really buff, smart human with a great epic beard. Now, you can probably see why this was published after his death. The argument challenged the basis for much of religious thinking of the time. Hume suggests that our conception of God is more a reflection of human psychology than a genuine insight into divine nature. Now, this work continues to be a topic of discussion in theology and philosophy classes alike. And as a pastor and professor, I have found Hume's work here to be a challenge, and it forces me to think very clearly regarding my argument for Christianity. And the dialogues were so controversial that Hume didn't, again, allow them to be published during his lifetime. He knew the work would likely be met with outrage and could damage his reputation. Now, he wasn't just a one-hit wonder that reworked that hit. He also had plenty of other intellectual, as the kids say, bops. The first is of the standard of taste. And so here, Hume tackles aesthetics, arguing that while beauty is subjective, some judgments are better than others. It's like he's saying, yes, taste is personal, but come on, Citizen Kane is objectively better than Sharknado. And so in this essay, Hume tries to reconcile the apparent subjectivity of taste with the fact that we often agree on aesthetic judgments. He suggests that ideal critics, free from prejudice and with refined sensibilities, can serve as standards for aesthetic judgment. And then we have My Own Life. This is Hume's autobiography written as he was dying. It's remarkably cheerful for a deathbed composition. It's like he's saying, I came, I saw, I skepticized, and I had a blast. And this short work is notable for its calm, even at times cheerful tone in the face of death, and it reflects Hume's lifelong commitment to reason and his skepticism about religious consolations. Then we have The History of England. This is Hume's massive historical work, and it's interesting because this was a bestseller in its time. It's like he decided, I'm going to take a break from blowing minds and I'm going to educate them instead about the history of England. And interestingly enough, the work is actually kind of considered his magnum opus because it was such a commercial success and it established Hume as a major historian. And it's notable for its attempt to impartiality and its emphasis on long-term social and economic factors that really kind of push historical change. So, who is the man behind the philosophy? What was Hume's human nature like? Now, while we often think of Hume as this kind of serious, skeptical philosopher, he had his charming side too. Charming like those little cactuses you see in line at Home Depot. So here are some fun anecdotes about Hume. He was considered the jolly skeptic. Despite his philosophical pessimism, Hume was known for his cheerful disposition. And this cheerfulness in the face of skepticism and morality, it's kind of a defining feature of Hume's character, and it suggests that philosophical doubt doesn't necessarily lead to existential despair. Then Hume once took a job as a tutor to a young lady in royalty, but was fired for being an odd kind of man. Apparently being a genius philosopher doesn't automatically make you good with kids. Shocker. And this reveals kind of the gap between Hume's intellectual brilliance, but his practical skills, or his social skills, or his emotional intelligence skills. It also reflects his challenges to finding stable employment early in his career. And then he was the awkward flirt. Hume once tried to impress some ladies by pretending to be a bear, wearing bearskins and growling. It didn't go well, and even brilliant philosophers can have cringe-worthy moments. Now, this story, whether it's true or whether it's apocryphal, has become a part of the Hume lore. It humanizes the great thinker, showing that even geniuses can make fools of themselves in matters of the heart. And then later in life, Hume served as a diplomat in Paris, where he became unexpectedly popular in French society. So who says philosophers can't be social butterflies? And Hume's popularity in Paris salons, it shows another side of his character, that despite his reputation as a skeptic and potential atheist, he was charming and sociable in person, able to win friends, even among those who might disagree with a lot of his ideas. Hume's influence on philosophy, it's hard to overstate. He took Empiricism to its logical conclusion, setting the stage for later developments in positivism and logical empiricism. His skepticism about causation influenced Kant's critical philosophy. Kant famously said Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumbers, and his moral philosophy, emphasizing sentiment over reason, was a precursor to later development in ethics. In epistemology, his critiques of induction and causation continue to be debated. His bundle theory of the self has influenced discussions in philosophy of mind and cognitive science, and his moral philosophy, with its emphasis on sentiment and utility, has been influential in the development of utilitarianism and other consequential ethical theories. Now, Hume's religious skepticism, particularly as expressed in the dialogues concerning natural religion, it does continue to be a touchstone for discussions in philosophy of religion. His arguments against miracles, his critiques of the design argument, they're still grappled with by theologians and philosophers of religion. And Hume's impact, it does go beyond philosophy. His economic writings, they influence Adam Smith, helping to lay the groundwork for classical economics, and his essays on various topics made him one of the first public intellectuals in the modern sense, because he addressed a wide range of social, political, and also cultural issues. Then Hume's historical writings, particularly the History of England, they were bestsellers in their time and helped establish history as a serious academic discipline, and his emphasis on social and economic factors in historical change anticipated later developments in historiography. So remember, as you're wrestling with these Hume concepts, that understanding Hume, it's kind of like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Just when you think you got it, it slips away from your experience. His ideas can be counterintuitive, and his skepticism can be unsettling. But don't let that discourage you. Grappling with Hume's ideas, it's kind of like a philosophical rite of passage. So keep flexing those mental muscles, and don't forget to question everything, especially your tendency to see cause and effect everywhere. Hume would want it that way.